It's Tim from Fair Play Now here today at Tisbury and with Ian Jarvis. So I first came across you, Ian, about 15 months ago at Burgess Hill in West Sussex. You did a talk there.
You were part of that group.
I was filming that.
Okay. That's new news to me.
Yeah, you do a lot of talks, don't you? That's probably blended into the background.
That was with Roy's group and the Burgess Hill Warriors and things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now I know.
I saw you talking much more recently, just a few weeks ago at Tisbury here, and would it be fair to say that you focus on the perils of 5G, or is it broader than that?
I think it's a little bit broader than that, really, Tim. I started in computing in 1968. Okay. So that gives you a little bit of context of where I started. I'm not the latest tech geek, at least not anymore, but I do actually have a degree in computing science, which I don't know if it's rare amongst the rebels of us again that are arguing against the rollout and the continued rollout of all the radiation over the years, maybe starting around about 2010, 2011, when 4G was first introduced. The name or the term electrosmog was developed or invented, coined if you like, because it was the beginning of having Wi-Fi, let's use the general term Wi-Fi, shall we?
Yeah.
Wi-Fi beamed all over the place, all the time at those frequencies of the mainly around the 1 gigahertz level. You needn't worry about the number, but it was getting higher than the radio and TV. We've had radio and TV at relatively low levels for many years, of course, but this started to give something different. We had 2G coming along, and then 3G, and 4G was quite a big difference because it was more widespread. There were more masts being put up, not as many as we're getting today, but there were more going up then. And that was this time when 4G was introduced that some of the naturalists in some of the nature researches noticed an effect on animals, plants, insects. Particularly well known amongst the people who know it. It's always a relative term, isn't it? Is the nature reserve on Mount Nardi, which is in the south of Australia. And
what's happening there?
Well, the rangers noticed that the biodiversity was declining. The animals that had been there were not so many of them. Birds and insects were avoiding the place and gradually moving away. So they noticed that loss. It's very difficult to notice when something disappears,
yes,
as opposed to something that it comes from the beginning. Diana Cordas on island of Samos noted that in her observational study of the insect loss there. After the 4G was introduced into the island. That's a relatively clear environment. They don't. Most of the neighbours around there were growing organically, she says in her report. But suddenly, in her walks around the island with her husband, she noticed that not so many insects now. And that was really when it started. As we just said, it's not so easy to notice when they disappear. If a new species of insect came, you'd notice it almost instantly, yes, at least if you're an entomologist or something. So if a bull walks down the street, you notice it's there immediately, or yes, relatively immediately. And that's something that we've also noticed in this country. And in many countries around the world, the slow loss, driving through particularly with people of my age, if I say to them, "Do you remember driving through the countryside in the 70s or the 80s, the 60s?" We had to stop every now and again to clean the windscreen. And now, when was the last time you had to do that?
Yeah, very, very true. Certainly in America, a feature of American petrol stations used to be people would come out and clean your windscreen.
Exactly,
for you.
They did. Yes, that's right. And we don't need that anymore. Now there are potentially other areas of concern relating to that, of course, with pesticides, the growth of glyphosate being sprayed all over the planet as if it's going out of fashion, and so on. So there's not just a single cause. I will state that quite categorically, but it's interesting to note that the bursts seem to happen with the change in levels of radiation, EMFs, if you like, the Wi-Fi radiation that we're getting all the time. If we think about human experiences, you go back to the electrification of America, at those low levels. Sam Millam was the one. Arthur Furstenberg gets a lot of credit for it. He reported basically what Sam Millam had found in his epidemiology studies by looking at cancer rates in different cities, and he noticed they increased within the next 10 years after the electrification, and he plotted that to show that it started in the first city that was electrified, and it pretty well followed a pattern all around. And he used the Amish people. It's a long time since I read his book, I have to confess, but he's still working. It's still both books are still available, Arthur Furstenberg's and Sam Millam. They're both well worth a read if you want any background, particularly historical background into different areas. So we noticed that, and then of course what happened around about the time that we had the so-called Spanish flu. What the Spanish did to deserve the name, that I don't know. Radiation was coming in. The telegraphy was developing. Telephone exchanges were coming in as well. But particularly the radar was coming in. And then you look at patterns of when other major worldwide health events, let's call them that, shall we, had occurred, and there's something changing. What have we had recently? This is where everybody shouts conspiracy theories, Jarvis. 5G, we've got a rollout of low Earth orbit satellites coming on from 2019. Was it the first 60 went up? I think with the first 60 with... I think it was Musk, wasn't it? Not Gates. They all went up, and they're only quite small satellites. So I'm told. I've never actually held one in my hands at all, but size of a small fridge, and they started going up. So we've had a lot of radiation. Look at the pattern of how it all started, relating to Wuhan, northern Italy, New York. They were the first three to get big hits of COVID.
Yes.
And they were also the first three to get serious upgrades of Wi-Fi technology, including 5G, in their areas, in their cities. It speaks. It says, I shouldn't be asked the question.
Exactly.
Is it involved?
Yeah.
In any of this stuff, in going back to the electrification days, we should be asking the question: was the electrification of cities in America and the UK the start of cancer, or the growth of cancer? I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying we need to ask the question, and it looks to me that we don't ask the question.
No.
No.
Not with any of this stuff.
No. I mean, if we go back to those early days in the 1800s, late 1800s, then there was a doctor, again mentioned in Arthur's book, Dr. George Beard, I think his name was, and he noticed there was this strange new disease going around. Didn't know what caused it.
Okay.
He didn't actually think about, well, could it be electricity? but he was looking outside of the individual for the external cause, which was the right place to be looking. He coined the term neurasthenia. And it was interesting that in this country, Charles Dickens, the writer, the author Charles Dickens, that same one, he was actually an observer of people, and he was writing at the time about people in the telegraph industries and the railways, where the lines were strung above the railways. A convenient place to put them, wasn't it? And I can remember telegraph poles along the railway lines in my youth. You know, you could always tell which way London was because the side of the crossbar on the telegraph pole told you which side London was. That was one of our navigating tricks in the Scouts. If you were somewhere near a railroad, give you a hint. But so he noticed, and he interviewed various workers. The interesting thing that from reading books about that and articles about it, is that it seemed that the workers knew what was causing their problems. It was this new telegraphy, it was this new telephone exchanges. That was another place it helped.
Incredible they had the instinct.
And they knew, but the scientists, the doctors, the way I put it is they were just too smart to recognise it and to think about it. You know, you can't be told that this is happening in this way, and you certainly can't be told by workers on the railways or in the telephone exchanges, can you? Not if you're a scientist.
No. There's certain parallels, more recent parallels with that sort of thinking as well.
There are, yeah.
And it's not like that's one precedent, and then we had the 1968 outbreak, and that was linked to, I can't remember what they were rolling out in the.
There was something new, wasn't there? I think more satellites or something were going up at that time, and I can't actually remember at the moment what it was. So there was certainly an upgrade in the release of that electromagnetic frequency radiation from something. I'm feeling it was satellites going up, but I could be wrong about that.
So every time there's a new technology, we tend to see an increase in health problems. And that goes from, all the way back to the early railway days, as you were describing a minute ago, to 1918, and then later as well. So right up to the present day, pretty much. So it's obvious. Well, it seems to me, at least, that every time a new frequency is brought in, it takes maybe a certain amount of time for the human body to respond to that.
That's an interesting point. If we allow that humans and to some extent animals as well can adapt, and we are very adaptable. It's true. Think about what we've had. Even just going back to before 2010. When there's very little of this higher frequencies. Even up to 2.4 gigahertz. That's what our routers are mostly using at the moment. And that, as some of you, some of the people watching this, and you will probably also, Tim, know, is the frequency used in a microwave oven.
Yeah.
So and people like myself and other friends of mine that I know of who are working in this area make the point. That's basically where we're living. It's like living in a microwave oven. 2.4 gigahertz around there is the frequency that affects water molecules. So to put it technically, I always say it jiggles the water molecules about. I often ask the question of audiences. I say, well, if it was perfectly safe, would the microwave oven manufacturers actually put a nice solid steel frame around it with a specially designed glass door that will not let the radiation out? If it was perfectly safe, they wouldn't need to do that, would they? And I'm sure it'd be an awful lot cheaper to put a plastic case around it and not worry about all that thing. So they're trying to stop the radiation out, and it's often one of the things that I think manufacturers put. I don't have one, so I can't say what the manufacturers say at the moment. But I've seen them saying, make sure that the door is closed. Don't put your cat in it. There was a story, you may be old enough to remember it, of somebody trying to dry out either a little cat or a little dog in a microwave oven, with obvious disastrous consequences. So yes, we're not going to want to put even our hand in one, let alone that. It tells its own story, doesn't it? That's what a modern router is beaming at. There's two frequencies that are common in our modern routers, 2.4 and 5. Now that's 5 gigahertz, which is a frequency, not 5 as in 5th generation, 5G. It's a little bit of a confusing terminology, but the people need to understand that is a very different thing. I was talking to a chap this morning who said, it shows 5G on my phone, but it's utter rubbish. He says, I don't get anything, it's not even as good as 4G. So he says, I've actually switched off 5G on my phone.
Right.
And that was before he even knew me. So that's an interesting thing that he is just a normal person. Am I allowed that word?
Yeah, very an anecdotal observation there. I was talking to another guy who's been looking into this kind of thing, and he said, I actually sort of called the title of the video, "We're being cooked in our homes." That's how he put it. So if it's sort of on the same frequency as microwaves, radiation, that would be a fair assessment, don't you think?
I think it is a fair assessment. Yeah, I got friends around the country who think the same. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if you go up to higher frequencies, 60 gigahertz, this was spoken about again when the COVID thing first came out to the news a few years ago now. 60 gigahertz compromises oxygen molecules. And in the early days, northern Italy was hit badly, and I can remember reading articles by Italian doctors who live in that area just south of the Alps, saying the symptoms are more like altitude sickness.
Interesting.
So that stuck in my mind at that time. Yes, and we were looking around for a cause and a reason and ultimately a solution at that time. And they came out quite early on saying it looks like altitude sickness. So was that frequency being brought out? I've no idea, Tim. Absolutely no idea.
No, it's probably one of those things.
But again, are we asking the questions? Are we asking the right questions? We're looking at all sorts of other things. Rarely, in almost any health situation, whether it's people, whether it's birds, in places like Texel Island, just off the coast of Netherlands, where a lot of birds have been dying. Nobody's asking the question, could it be all the radio frequencies that are starting to be beamed? It's a very big ship lane. It could be that.
Yes.
Let's investigate absolutely everything. That used to be science, didn't it? You'd say, well, what is possible? I often say my first question, thinking as a scientist, and I don't work as a scientist now, and make that quite clear, would be, well, what's changed?
Yeah, that
has anything changed?
Just basic detective work, it would seem, really.
Yes. Yeah, there was an interesting article in the Light paper, this current issue. Did you see that? What would Kojak? If you're too young to remember Kojak and you're watching this, he was a detective in the long time ago, 70s, was it?
70s. Showing my age as well.
Yeah. So and it was quite an interesting way, I thought, of bringing out the issues relating to it.
Yeah, indeed. So just to change tack a little bit, you go around, is it pretty much the whole country giving your talks? I think the one I attended in Sussex a few years, a while ago, was about 3 hour long talk, 2.5 hour.
Yeah,
talk.
I do. You're right, Tim. Since then. I've gone even further south, down to Totnes, I think is the furthest south in the south coast, drawing a straight line across, and Ashford and Chelmsford in the east. I was in North Wales, in Bangor, just recently, and on the western side, and all the way up to Aberdeen. There's a lot of gaps in between, so I'm willing to go anywhere, and I could do it via Zoom, of course, but it's important that I go there because I can see people, I can talk with them, they can see me, I'm a real person, they can ask questions, and so many things. It's that element of humanness which we seem to be in a huge danger of losing, isn't it, with all the social media? I don't need to go out and see my friends, I can see them on a screen, that sort of thing. It's very, very different.
it is, as we found out during the Zoom boom, if you want to call it that way, during the first lockdown, especially when people were encouraged to talk to their friends on Zoom, and not the same when we eventually got back to the pubs and everything else. We realised what we'd been missing.
So yes, I do. I go around the country. I talk with them about radio frequencies, Wi-Fi, EMFs, a fairly wide spectrum, and I am insistent on saying, yes, 5G is very hyped at the moment. It's been a super marketing term for the industry, so I use it as a marketing term for me. I'll talk about 5G, if that sells me a bit easier. But I also talk about those other frequencies and the point of, and it's not a technical talk. The one thing I like to do, and I have had feedback, is to make it understandable to anybody in the audience, whether they know anything about this or not.
I found it, your talks are easy to follow, so I'd endorse that.
And you're just a cameraman.
Exactly, I appreciate you sort of taking the time and effort to go around and spread the word on this, and
helps being retired, or an age where I don't have to work anymore.
Right, yes,
this is my work now.
And where are you going next
I don't know. Back in the office, as it were, Sue is willing and ready to take phone calls, emails, to make productions or whatever. To make diary events. She's my diary manager. She does my diary manager, and she saved me a huge amount of time and effort, and she does a much better job at it than I would do anyway.
Where can people find you if they want to book you?
They can find us on standupwolverhampton.com. That's the website. It's not my website. It's the whole team's website. They had it before I came along, and was asked to start looking at the 5G aspects because I had that IT experience for previous years, 30 years or so. And if they go onto that website, there's a page which is called EMFs and 5G, I think, something like that. The first is EMF, it's the obvious page. They go onto that, right at the very top, there's the email address for Sue, email address for, if you like, our help desk. At the moment, there's just two of them, Jane and Judith. And that's where they can get in touch. And I'm always there, so if they get in touch with Sue, Sue gets in touch with me. So that's the easiest and the quickest way of getting any attention, any action, whether it's to help with objections to a mast that you've got coming up in your front door or in your neighbourhood, advice how to do that, or whether it's, we'd love Ian to come to wherever it is in the talk, and and to make an arrangement with Sue. So either of those, that's the best place. And also on there, they can find some documents and articles that have been created or put up there.
Sounds like a really valuable resource.
It is. It's limited. I'm not trying to build a universal website on radio frequencies. There are plenty of those around the place. You know, Oliver, who I know, RF Info, that's Oliver, he's got masses of information on that, so people can get lots of information. My angle is the planning system. Most of it is about the planning system and how you can object to masts going up in your city, in your neighbourhood, whatever, because all the masts...
successes on that.
Oh yeah, yes, they are being refused around the country. Different rates in different towns, but essentially every ground-based mast needs some form of planning approval. Okay, there's two systems: the fast track, if you like, called prior approval, and the full system. So it does depend. It gets a little bit more complicated than that, but there are ways that we can argue. And I suppose as part of that, I need to say, well, why should we? You know, that's the question that people would next put.
Yes.
I'm sure you're thinking of that.
Yeah.
Why should we object? Well, one of the questions is, have you been asked? Most people have not. There was a consultation in 2019, 2020 about the rollout of 5G, but it was only done online, and only if you actually happen to find it would you know it even existed. I only know one other person of all the people I've met travelling around the country who actually put in a comment to that consultation. I put my own comment in. I wrote it as an article because the questions on these consultations are quite limited in mind mostly. So I actually gave them a narrative thing, which is actually and that submission is on that website as well, so people can read that, and it gives them I think a good background, a non-technical background to many of the issues with it. And of course the second question they always say is, well, what about the health thing? Because a lot of people that are concerned about the health don't know why, and don't even know if they should be.
Okay.
So that's a big issue. I mean, it brings us face to face with an organisation called the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. ICNIRP. Yeah, you're right. ICNIRP, of course. Mm-hmm. You'll be familiar with that. ICNIRP was created in the 1990s as a body to help to say, what do we need to think of in terms of safety of this? Because we had evidence from decades before. In 2003, the US Navy Science Department put a paper out just listing all the studies, 2,300 of them. That was 1973.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, so you can imagine what's come since then. Lots of it. So by the time we got to the 90s, everybody knew that there were biological effects from EMFs. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The difference between what our thinking is that some people say, yeah, but there's not significant evidence. And some of us say, well, the evidence of any sort is enough to make an ethical or a political decision. You know, well, I'm not trying to prove the science, I'm just saying, is it uncertain? You know, remember the tobacco industry?
Yes.
You know, since that was all sorted, emails or letters have come out saying, from parts of the industry saying, our product is uncertainty. It's not cigarettes, it's uncertainty.
Right.
So, and they're always keeping that uncertainty going. You know, and it took 30 years before they, or maybe even longer, to start introducing the rules and the regulations and the restrictions. Now, you wouldn't think of, you can go into almost any pub in any village and you know it's going to be a smoke-free zone. People just don't think about it now because we know it causes lung cancer.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a contributory factor at the very least. Are we going to wait another 50 years before we prove that? And you know what, Wi-Fi, because we can't see it, you know, we can see smoke, we can see asbestos, we can flick around DDT powder and so on, but we can't see this. That's the problem.
That's the insidious thing. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. But what IGNIRP said then, they published the first paper in 1998 as a guideline. It's not a standard. It's not an international standards body. It's not part of the International Standards Organization, ISO. So you can't get an ISO certificate in for your equipment, like you can with so many things in business these days. So they published that. There was an update in 2012, and that was just after the International Association for Research on Cancer, which is a WHO body, published their report saying that it is a possible carcinogen, 2B. Probable carcinogen is 2A, and definite carcinogen is 1. It was a bit controversial in those days. Some scientists particularly thought it should be higher than 2B, but nonetheless it was there as 2B. And they ignored that. They didn't add that into their considerations at all. And also there was a new version, the latest version, published in 2020, and I've downloaded that. Again, I'm not sure how many people have actually read it, certainly in planning departments, because as soon as you open the text and read the first paragraph, it says, this guideline is for the protection of humans.
Right.
And it doesn't go on to anything else.
Oh.
Okay, so it's like the full stop there.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't even mention, it doesn't mention even to exclude animals, insects, bugs in the soil, birds, trees. It doesn't even mention them. It just says, which wouldn't be an issue if somebody else was taking care of all that lot. But it just says, this is for the protection of humans. And then it goes on to say, against substantiated, note that word, it's an important word, substantiated adverse health effects. So that's immediately, in the first couple of paragraphs, an acknowledgement that we have, science has discovered substantiated, i.e. proven, adverse health effects. So it's not saying there are no adverse health effects and it will stop them happening. It just says that's what it is.
Okay.
And you know, if you read that, you can see when they put up this standard, this guideline, I should say, which we have adopted hook, line and sinker in the UK, and it says, and then again on about page 25, I think it is, it says something like, below our limit that we've set here, it doesn't say you will not have any effect, not have any ill effect. It says you are unlikely to suffer harm. Not that you won't, doesn't give a percentage, nothing. Doesn't say, you know, if you're a little child, you might be more at risk than a grown adult, or if you're an elderly person, you might be, again, at more risk. Doesn't say any of that, just says you're unlikely to suffer harm. Now that is
it's very vague.
It is very vague. It's not exactly a scientific term, is it?
No,
you know,
not at all. Not
so
at all.
that, I mean, that's the first question we need to ask about that guideline, and then we can say, again, in the second section, it's still about page 1 or 2. It starts giving you exclusions. Okay, so we've said in this paper, we've said this is for the protection of humans. And then it says, but we are going to exclude anybody with metal in their body because we know some medical procedures involve EMFs and they involve putting metal in people's bodies. Mm-hmm. And it says the metal in your body can actually disrupt the signals from the EMF. So it says we're going to exclude anybody with metal in their body. Now, think about it, Tim.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. Dental amalgams. That's the first one everybody thinks of. And even if you've had them taken from your body, you're still going to have some mercury in your body for quite a few years afterwards. Think about braces that people have. Many children these days have braces in their body, and this is next to their head. Cochlear implants can have some metal in them. Stents in your heart operations, pacemakers. Again, they've got metal in the body, and it also says it can affect active medical devices. So that's a double whammy. With your pacemaker has got metal in parts of it, and it's also an active device, so it can affect that. I've heard people saying or telling stories of friends that they've had with pacemakers in feel something when they walk past a particular mast in their street. Again, that's just a story. There's no proof, but it's a story.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. It's somebody's lived experience, and to me that's important. And so you can go on thinking of operations, knee, hips replacements, all those sorts of things. Spinal operations will have metal quite often to stabilise people with scoliosis. We know scoliosis for some reason happens more in young girls than it does in boys, and they can put fix the spine with a metal or fusing it, but they can also use metal in it. So there's so many things.
And that's just one exclusion as well.
That's just the metal. Yeah. So that probably is upwards of 75 or more percentage. Then it says if you're undergoing a medical experiment or medical treatment, mm-hmm. you're also excluded.
Okay, which is again a lot of people.
Again, a lot of people.
won't expand on that too much.
We're up to about 90-something% plus of all those exclusions of different people that there are. So who does it protect? And the last statement in that section is, oh, and by the way, they don't use that phrase, of course. Oh, and by the way, it can also affect any electrical equipment not related to health.
Okay.
In the vicinity.
Yes.
Like your radio or something like that. Or anything else. Or possibly even your smart meter.
Yeah.
It's almost a nonsense, but this is what the planning authorities in our country, in our councils at a local authority level, of course, use as their guiding principle to say we don't have to think about human health. We don't have to think about an environmental risk because the government has said it's safe. And they think that ICNIRP also covers the environment and animals and insects. And even when I pointed out to them many times over, as I have done, and others as well, they've had, I would think, hundreds, all the councils together must have had hundreds of objections to Mars saying, what about the environmental risk? Because ICNIRP does not cover that.
No. So a lot of there's a lot of holes in it. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
A lot of cause for concern, I think, about these technologies, and it's something that needs to be discussed further. I think. So, what would you say? Maybe resource-wise, you've just given us details of the website, but is there any books people can read? Say they're totally new to this. They thought that 5G and wireless was perfectly safe. They've just started to see this kind of thing. Where can they look next?
My number one recommendation for a first timer is Martin Black's. He's got a little book, which is one of the reasons why it's a good start. It's about this thick. And you think about some other books. There was a recent one by Joe Mercola, I'm never sure how to pronounce his name, which is about this thick, and Arthur Furstenberg's, which is a tome of historic proportions, is even thicker than that. So, but this one, Martin died a few years ago now, but it's a small. He has managed to write it in non-technical language all the way through. And I would, if anybody with a reasonable education, which most of us get in the UK these days, could read it and understand it, at least 90% of it, I would say. So again, that's another plus. He manages also to cover pretty well all the angles on this, because we've been very restricted in what we've discussed this morning. So yeah, he covers all sorts of different angles, and particularly he covers the health angle as well, as well as others, and the technical angles. He was a scientist for many years, working on this particular issue, and also he's got a very good list of references in the back. I mean, if you buy the physical book, of course, you've got to type them in laboriously to your computer. Yeah. So they're not. I don't know if it's on an ebook form or anything at all.
Well, sorry, what's the name of the book?
Oh, the name of the book, I haven't said that yet, have I? It's Martin Blank is the author. Blank, as in blank page.
Right.
And the book is called Overpowered.
Oh, nice simple one to remember.
Yeah, simple one to remember. Overpowered. That's my number one for anybody who's particularly new to this topic. And then it's like they say in AI, there's a combinatorial explosion because there are so many books you can read. Joe Mercola's, it's called EMF * D. Okay. EMF * D. Yeah. EMF'd. It is actually a good book. He does like to go into his biology in minute detail, which is not a bad thing, but you can skip a couple of chapters if you're not into going in that detailed way. But the rest of it is again a pretty good read, actually. I have read it fairly recently. So that could be another one. And then there are masses and masses of books. Some of them will be completely pro all the technology, and there are good things about technology. Let's get that. Yeah,
it's not like we're Luddites or anything.
No. I worked 30 years in IT, of course, from 1968. But there is then. Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots of websites as well. You can type in all sorts of things. I would steer people away from the, generally speaking, from the manufacturers' websites. I use them. I get some information from them, I'm reading about things from Ericsson and Nokia and the different companies. It gives me an insight into what they're doing and some of the technology even. On my talk, I do show a slide which I made up from a Nokia document, which gives information on the spectrums, the different frequencies that are used, and what their range is, and what their parameters are for each of those. So yes, I do make a good use of that. But that's me, and other technical people will be reading those things. They're not general reading material. Not for a novice, I would think, or beginner. But there is plenty out there. Again, Oliver's website, Oliver Percival, I know him well, and he's got RF Info. I think you know that one.
Yes.
RFinfo, .co.uk. And there are so many that it.
A lot of things to be looking into.
Yes, and if you feel that you've got effects, you feel sensitive when you're around either somebody on a computer or even your mobile phone, then there is the Radiation Research Trust in this country. Eileen O'Connor is again a good trooper. She's done talks as well. I've seen her. We haven't met in the flesh yet, but we share a lot of concerns. It's a Radiation Research Trust, and she's doing a lot of good work in this country. It's a UK site, and
she can suggest a lot of mitigating things that you can be doing.
Yeah, of course, yes, and there are things that we can all do. We need to remember or learn that the people who feel sensitive and are usually accused of being, hyping it and it's all in your mind, they are just feeling what we're influencing. It's affecting us just as much as it's affecting them, just that many of us will not feel it.
Yes.
Canaries in the mind is, of course, the simile, but they are, and it's also, if we call it EHS or EES, electrosensitivity, it's almost like we're making them have an illness. And that's the wrong way of looking at it. We should look at it as if they're giving us a warning. There's nothing at all wrong with them.
No.
Nothing.
No.
They're perfectly healthy people. They are just happen to be more aware, let's use that term, of the influence of this EMF than most of us are. I think that's a really positive way of looking at something, instead of say blaming them and sort of shutting them away. Because people who have worked on that, including people like Professor Belpom in Paris, say even though he does offer treatments, he says it's not a cure. The only cure is to get away from it. Right. And that's something that we who I feel it a little bit at different times. I've certainly had nosebleeds when I've gone into areas where they've got more frequency, more radiation than I'm used to at home. I sleep under a canopy, so that I've got a canopy around me with protection from underneath as well, even though it's not particularly high in my bedroom. And there are things you can do to help you with that, and there are companies out there with products and things. Just be aware that they don't all work. Most of them do, but not all of them work, and you need to be a little bit. What's the word I'm looking for?
Do a bit of groundwork, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So there are things, and there are things that we can do to generally protect ourselves if we want to.
Like hardwiring your routers.
Those sorts of things are all good things to do. Yeah, it's a big topic in itself.
Yeah.
But that would be the first thing to do. Use an Ethernet cable.
Okay. Okay. Well, you've been very generous with your time. We'll sort of probably wrap up, but I'm going to finish this. Let's say you've got someone who comes up to you and says, "Look, I've never experienced any of these ill effects. I think it's just a load of nonsense, conspiracy theories. There's nothing wrong with 5G or wireless." What would you say to a person like that?
I would say, well, what research have you done?
Yeah.
Have you looked into it? Have you just listened to the government or just read pamphlets from the industry? And if they say, yes, I've read lots of them and I just think the science isn't good enough, I say, well, fine, that's okay, we can disagree. I'm not going to waste my time arguing with somebody who is never going to change their mind, whatever. I might suggest a book, like Martin Blank's, for example, for them to read, which wouldn't take them too much time. It is a matter of, well, what research have you done?
Yeah, well, we've seen that in other areas, haven't we?
Haven't we just?
People who have sort of done many hours, or hundreds or thousands of hours of research, and then other people who just watch TV and call you crazy.
Yeah, and maybe I am, but
it's
a good crazy.
Well, you seem to be a very rational person putting a very rational case together, and it's something that we should be paying attention to, I think. So right, well, we can,
and on a social point as well. Yes, as well.
Yes,
I think it's important that we don't just skip over all the social points and the effect of too much screen time and all those things as well. They are, I mean, we don't have time, it would take us all day to discuss those things, but there are other angles to this other than the ones we've discussed this morning.
Yeah, very true. Well, Ian, thank you very much. And again, if you just want to say that website where people can book you and find out more, Ian Jarvis's website is
Stand Up Wolverhampton. Wolverhampton.com actually .com,
right, okay.
Which is where I live in Wolverhampton, and the EMF page within that will give you, and right at the very top you can see that our contact details. Don't use the please contact us page, because that goes to my colleagues and things who are working on other things at the moment. So use the contacts in the top of that EMF page. You can get in touch with us, scroll down, and you can see lots of other articles and things. The ones that have come from like ICNIRP or the government, I've very conveniently highlighted the important little bits in there, so you can read them and follow my highlights. You don't have to go into all the detail, but if you want a clean copy, I always put the source of them, so you can go to the source website and download a clean copy for yourself.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Really good resource, and I'll put the link to that in the description below this video as well, so you can find it there, and go along and check out the work, the resources, and if you want Ian to come and talk at your event, we just want to find out more, get in touch with him. So Ian, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Tim.